So there was a somewhat abandoned boat at the boatyard I've been using for, gosh, 15 years. And the owner of the boatyard and the owner of the boat have been going at it for a long time. And finally, the owner of the boat said, okay, I'm going to scrap it. And they've been taking all the goodies off of it for a month or two now and trying to find a truck to haul it to the dump. The truck's supposed to come tomorrow. So I noticed this boat had aluminum cleats, and they kind of match our houseboat cleats. So boatyard owner said, come get whatever you want. So we got there and messed around, and the cleats are trash. I've never seen anything like this. They just when we were taking the bolts off, they just fell apart. And closer examination, all the cleats on the boat looked like this. Then we noticed this big old windlass was right behind the cleats. And we said, what the heck, it's going to the dump. Might as well see if we can fix it. So we could have crawled underneath in the rope locker and dealt with all these big rusty bolts, or we just took the sawzall and the grinder and cut the front of the boat off. So I have a windlass and I'm going to rebuild it, and I don't have a home for it, so I'll rebuild it and try to sell it and see if we can make some coin. So what's a little bit surprising is so far the 4 big bolts came out without a fight, without much of a fight. And even more surprising, the cap came out, which was an Allen screwed. It's a little bit of corrosion. But of course the thing didn't want to come off, so squirting oil in it, working on it with the crowbar without trying to bend it. And I might put some heat on it, but I've noticed it's not sitting flat with the plate under it. I don't know whether the shaft is bent or it's built like that. Guess we'll find out. So I've been wedging and banging and prying and heating and dumping oil in the top, and it moved. It moved about more than 1/8 of an inch, so I think I got it now. Just have to keep tapping. I don't want to break the thing, but it's got to come off. I'm not an expert, but I believe these capstan winches are kind of out of favor. This requires somebody up front wrapping a rope around it and then assisting it. Seems like most people now want to chain gypsy where they can just operate from the bridge with a button, and they don't require anybody up front to do anything. But I don't have any facts to back that up. It just seems like all the ones that are advertised for sale now, they all have the chain gypsy on them. Got it off, and I didn't break anything. And now I need to figure out how to take this apart. But I may go home and get on the computer tonight, because I can't really tell if there's a snap ring or something in there. So looking at this thing this morning, we have a pin which drives the capstan, which obviously needs to come out. And I tapped on it and it moved a little bit, but it kind of mushroomed the end, so I'm gonna take the flap disc on the grinder and kind of unmushroom the end and see if I can't get it out. And under it, looks like a hex nut, which is really strange. But I don't think it's screwed to the shaft. I think it has something to do with the seal in this plate. So when I get this pin out, I'm gonna whack the crap out of it with a maul and see if it won't drive through. Can't imagine that nut turning with the shaft. But I can't get under the bottom to measure the shaft to see if maybe it does turn with the, so we're going to give it a whack in a little bit and see what happens. So I got it to move that way a little bit, but then the end's mushroomed again. So this end that was a little mushroomed, I just cut it off about 1/8 of an inch, and I kind of tried to grind it to a point, and I tried to go back that way, this time with a punch. So I just ended up cutting the pin off with the grinder, cut it off flush with both sides. Should be able to, if this thing is worth saving, I'll be able to put this in a press and press it out better than beating on it with a hammer. And where it was on the bench, if I beat on the top, it was just hitting the bench. So I've got it supported by the forks on the forklift. And I got to get the big artillery out and see if I can't get this thing to move. So my My search on the internet last night was not extremely fruitful, but I did come to the conclusion, and this is what I could read, is that it takes a lot of force to get this thing out. So I started off pretty carefully with a lead snubber so that I wouldn't mushroom the bronze shaft, and it was working. It's moving. Every hit makes it move. But the lead kind of gave up the ghost, so I switched to an aluminum block, which worked pretty well as far as it would go until the aluminum got flush with the top of the other casting that's on the top of the anchor pulpit here. So that's when things started going bad. I used a socket to try to continue beating it through the hole. It seemed like it should have got looser by now, but it didn't. And I kind of destroyed the socket, so then I went with different pieces of metal, and I drove it down pretty doggone far, and I realized I was doing damage to the bronze using all those punches, even though I had put a washer between the punches and the bronze shaft. I was definitely doing damage, but at this point I was thinking I could still save the shaft, get a machine shop to put it on the lathe and kind of clean up the end. But at some point when it just kind of quit, I finally got curious and looked underneath and realized that what I was doing was driving the shaft. The anchor windlass was not coming loose. I was driving the shaft through the anchor windlass. I knocked a plate off the bottom of the windlass, and there was a key that I sheared. And I guess remnants of the key was scratching the shaft, leaving a little divot through the shaft. So this is the point where my mindset kind of changed from, I wonder if I can make this thing work again, to, I wonder how this thing works. So from here on out, I'm just trying to get the thing apart because I'm curious to see what's inside it and how it was put together. And I enjoy doing that kind of stuff. Alright, so I'm a little confused. I thought by beating down the shaft I would be lowering the whole unit because it doesn't seem to be attached anymore. But in fact I'm just driving the shaft through the bottom, and it looks like there was a key. There's a keyway, and it looks like I've split the key and it's cutting a groove down the shaft. So maybe that's what this hex nut thing is all about. Maybe that lowers the deal. I don't know, but nothing ventured, nothing gained. Let's see. My initial optimism is all going away. It appears that the bottom part of the winch comes through the anchor pulpit, because this is stainless steel, that's not bronze. There was a bronze bushing in it and I beat it down. The pin is refusing to move anymore. I managed to get this, what I thought was a hex shape. I thought there was a nut holding it up. So, and it was all boogered up, so I cut some holes with the grinder, and I was able to get the top plate off with minimal damage. I could braze that back, but I don't know, this thing's pretty rotten. I mean, it's rusted. It's rusted all the way through. But I still want to take the thing off, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to cut some relief holes with the big grinder and see if I can't drop the whole unit. I think if the whole unit was on the ground, I could put it in a proper press, which a friend has, and finish taking it apart without doing any more damage than I already have, which is probably a lot. Grinder cut down about 3 inches, so I was able to chisel out a lot of different layers of fiberglass, wood, and fiberglass. And I thought maybe it might let go now, but wasn't happening. All right, I finally got it out. The triangle I cut with the grinder and chiseled out the bulk, but that didn't do it. So then I drilled a bunch of holes around the perimeter, and with the Sawzall I was able to free it up. It's a full 5 inches was embedded, and it looks like it was resined in place. So when I was beating on it, what should have happened was the whole thing should have come loose, but since this was so tight and embedded in there, all that happened was I drove the shaft through the bottom where it probably wasn't supposed to go. So pull off the motor and take a look inside. and see if I have totally destroyed this thing or if it was no good to begin with. We'll find out shortly. The motor came out with no problem, and the worm gear, just looking at it, looks like it's in good shape. So I'll put some 12 volts on here. If this runs, maybe somebody might need this thing. This is the shaft that I drove through that I shouldn't have, and you can see where the the shear pin left a little track. And now I'm draining the oil, and I want to remove this cover plate, but these tiny little bronze screws are stuck, so I'm just going to get the grinder and trim them off. So obviously I have cracked the hub of the big spur gear, which is a little disappointing, but I didn't know any better. And I'm gonna still confusing what would be the proper way to get the keyway out of there. So I'm going to turn it over. From this side I can see what looks like 2 set screws, or at least the holes for them. I can't really see the set screws. And I'm going to loosen those. But again, how would the key come out of there? This is interesting. So I cut this top nipple off. Wasn't much good. And I can see that the shaft, you can see the bronze bushing. The shaft looks like it's at the top of the spur gear. And I'm long past the point of trying to save anything. I just want to take it apart to see how it's put together. So I'm going to go ahead and try to beat it the rest of the way through. It shouldn't have that much more. Okay, a little change of plans. I turned it over and drove it back out the way that it was going in. And that had the bushing fall out. And that loosened it enough where I could turn it with the pipe wrench, because before I couldn't turn it. And that lined up the Allen screws where I could get to them. So now I have the Allen screws out, and I'm going to remove, this is all lumpy. I'm going to remove that and see if I can't drive it out again. Seems like I'm right where I am before. It went to a certain point easily and then it stopped. And it seems to stop when the end of the shaft is at the top of the spur gear. Not sure what's going on. I'm going to turn it over and beat it back the other way. Take another look. Okay, I think maybe it just swelled up again, even though I used a block of wood. Well, not the whole way. I'm going to remove some of that metal with the grinder and try again. If you remember earlier in the video, I thought it looked like the shaft might be bent. It's not in the center of this hole. And this is factory stuff, so I'm assuming that it probably was bent. I didn't do anything to bend it. I certainly did my share of damage, but I didn't do anything to bend it. Okay, I finally got the shaft out. Now the gear is tight, but I think that little ring that's between the gear and it looks like the welded housing, I think if I can knock that out sideways, I think the gear will have enough slack to come out. So after it's finished, what are we left with, and was it worth it? Well, hard to put a price tag on that. I got a nice roller from the front of the anchor pulpit. I got this big capstan, which I don't know, it's kind of decorative. I don't think anybody would ever want it. It's kind of beat up. Got some nice stainless steel bolts. Got some bent objects of my own. I got a nice bronze shaft. I don't think it's worth putting it back in a machine, but it's nice to have around. I've got this big brass plate, which is kind of an interesting object. Don't know if it has any value. Got some aluminum backup plates. I don't know why they drill the holes all in the sides. The spur gear and the shaft and the roller bearings are excellent condition. That might have some value. The big gear, although it's broken or cracked, it has no wear on the outside. I think a good machine shop could silver solder this chunk back into place, machine this round, and slide a steel collar over it to give it some strength back for way less money than buying a new one. But I'm just guessing, I don't really know. And the electric motor, I haven't put power to it, but it turns freely and it's not all corroded, so I think might be worth something to somebody. And I got a lot of exercise for the last 3 days. I guess I worked on this maybe 4 hours total, maybe 5 hours. No regrets. Been nice if I could have got it apart without breaking this gear, but I didn't know. I do know that if this was on the front of somebody's boat and they wanted to not destroy the boat, it would have been a bear to get this thing out of here, because it was really embedded in all that fiberglass.